Chad, there is a group called the Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sport. And there's one ESPN writer, at least he was asked or approved to write this column for ESPN. He's not a full-time writer, who says that Major League Baseball is not diverse enough, either racially or through gender, and points to all these different stats about the lack of African Americans playing in baseball, but fails to mention what the NBA is currently consisting of, where only 3% of the NBA players are Latino, 0.4% are Asian, 16% are Caucasian, and no one says that's a problem either. And I don't think it's a problem because the best players are playing in the NBA. I would say the same for Major League Baseball. And based on the C+ grade, I'm sitting here going like, didn't we already know this? Like the direction of where Major League Baseball has gone, the players that are at the top of the game in the entire world are coming out of the Dominican Republic. They're not coming out of the United States by and large. The best player in the world is Asian, in Shohei Ohtani, and he's compensated like that.
Yeah, it's all about, to me, this is far less about diversity and more about aspirations. And the aspirations of people from different countries of what sport their best athletes want to play.
Well, keep playing.
And want to conquer.
And keep playing.
Want to keep playing. This is not just some, poorly kept secret out there. The best athletes in every country could pick a sport at a young age and excel in it. It's about what they want to stay into and what they want to keep playing. When I grew up, all of my favorite baseball players were African American players. Eric Davis, Ricky Henderson, David Justice. I can go on down the list. Those were the players I liked watching more than anyone else. So I also want to see more African American kids grow up in the game and continue on through Major League Baseball. I would love to see that. But I think here's what happens psychologically. And it happens with white dudes in basketball too. There are a lot more white guys playing Major League Baseball than there are African Americans. There's a lot more Latin American players playing Major League Baseball, and that's because everyone in the countries they grow up in, they're wanting to grow up and play baseball or soccer. Why does America fall behind the rest of the world in soccer? Because almost every other country, all of their best athletes start in soccer, stay in soccer, excel in soccer. And in the United States, the best athletes out there oftentimes are not being gravitated towards soccer. That's not what they're drawn to. They're drawn to what they see most of. NFL football is what they want to play. They want to play in the NBA. They want to play Major League Baseball. But for a long time, there's a lot of black kids in America who see a lot of African Americans playing in the NBA, and that's what they want to play. Or in the NFL, and they want to play that. I think psychologically, that has a big effect. And it just perpetuates one towards the other. It's not Major League Baseball's fault for that. If there's any lack of diversity, well, that's not the problem for them.
Well, I see this, and I think you can make the same argument for the lack of other ethnicities in other Major League sports. It's just how you want to frame it.
Yeah.
And they decided to go with the selective casting of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, it's not their kind of diversity they want.
Right.
The Latin American diversity or foreign-born diversity, that's not good enough for them. They just want more African Americans.
I do think there is, and it's not like you just snap your fingers and change that to what you're saying. I think there's a deeper conversation on how many kids start out playing baseball versus how many continue to stick with it. And I think this changed around our generation in high school, Chad. I really do. Because at least and you or I from within 60 miles, 100 miles from each other.
Yep.
And when we were in high school, and at least where I went to high school, the coaches were competing against each other on which sport the best players were going to play, and that turned out to be, in many cases, basketball. The basketball coach won out on that argument on where you're going to spend your time, and your year-round assets were going to be focused on getting better at one sport instead of playing multiple. And I think once you get out of the junior league and Babe Ruth league, by and large, you pick a sport once you become a freshman in high school. one or two. I don't know of many that are playing 3 or 4. I mean, in today's NFL draft, how many do we see he played basketball and football? Not many baseball players, not many soccer players. Track, basketball, and football are the predominant sports that we see for the average American athlete that are making it at the highest level. And
Yes.
and you could reverse it if you went and discuss Dominican Republic. It's soccer and baseball, right? On what you're growing up playing. And these guys end up becoming the best players in the world by and large, the most consistent, dominant players at that sport.
There's also, there's so many factors in this, but I think for some diversity committee to come up with, you got a C+ because you don't have enough black players is ludicrous. And also, it's a problem Major League Baseball has tried to address with the RBI program in inner cities, trying to get more.
And with the new rules. They're trying to get more eyeballs on their product.
Playing the game and all of that. But at some point, great athletes are going to make a decision. How often do you see an NBA player or a football player in the NFL or NBA that says, hey, by the way, this guy was drafted in the 17th round out of high school in baseball, but they chose a different sport? It happens all the time, right?
Yep.
Look, we could unpack this a lot of different ways. Travel baseball is very expensive. At a young age, it takes more time commitment and equipment commitment.
Now there's fall
to play
ball.
the game.
Yeah, again, you have to.
Basketball and football.
It's unfair.
Football is way more organized by a school or a program.
The AAU circuits, the different things you have to do in the off season now. It's in season if you're in. It's in season for the next sport you want to play, but it's the off season program for the sport that you love growing up, whatever it is, and that coach expects 100% attention in that direction. And that's very unfortunate, but that's the very specific lane that everyone's focused on now. You pick your craft and you stick with it. And if you don't, you don't play.
Yeah.
You feel like you're losing out on an opportunity to prove your starting quality, or you're going to get your minutes as a sophomore or junior.
Well, and also, again, the psychological part of it, right? Like we talk about representation all the time.
Yeah.
I want to turn on a TV and see people who look like me. You hear this all the time, or there's not enough people who look like me or are like me when I'm watching a sport or watching a television show or a movie or whatever it may be. Kids tend to gravitate towards that as well. And, I'll give you an example. I didn't do that. Now, I played basketball growing up in baseball. I was way naturally better at baseball, but to Hutton's point, you get pushed by your school a lot of times towards basketball over baseball in different instances. And I was one that I liked basketball more. Well, I played my first AAU tournament at 14 or 15. And guess what? I quickly realized when I played some teams with inner city players that were a lot better and a lot more talented than me, probably wasn't going to play in the NBA. Didn't stop me from watching the NBA and aspiring to that and wanting to do that one day. But had I stuck with baseball, yeah, maybe I could have played in college. Wouldn't have been a major league or anything, but maybe I could have gotten some scholarship money having done that. There are now athletes making that business decision at the age of 9 or 10 and going into one sport. I didn't have the foresight to make that decision. I liked basketball because I liked it more.
But I think
it wasn't me making a decision on I could go further in one sport or the other. I could have gone further in baseball. But I chose basketball because I liked it more. How many great athletes are making that call, or are they just saying, I've got a better future here, so I'm going to go in this direction? I think it's a lot of business decisions being made also.
And a way out, right?
For a lot of people.
Of what happened, what you saw your friend do, or the best player to come through your school, what that guy or girl ended up doing for that matter, whether it's softball or basketball in women's sports. But I do think that the parents now are around our age of the 9, 10-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
And it was when we were in school playing, the coaches were bitching and moaning about who was going to get the so-and-so player to stick around during baseball season or during football season. Focus on basketball, focus on football,
Coaches
whatever.
would fight over athletes all the time.
They want you running track, and that's about it. Because that keeps you in shape year-round. That was the focus. And it's also the coaches that don't like each other, right?
Yeah, and
that's also too. It's a competitive thing when you're recruiting down the hallway.
I don't
think that's the sole focus, but I do think that plays a factor.
Well, and again, great athletes can do almost anything. right?
Yes.
If you're one of the
Yes.
elite athletes, if you started a sport young and just stuck with it, you could do it for a long time. I'm willing to bet.
Jim Brown playing lacrosse, for instance.
The guys who aren't 6'11", 7 feet tall. If you are 6'2" to 6'6", playing in NBA, those NBA players are good enough athletes that if they would have decided, you know what, I'm just going to stick with baseball starting at 7 years old, and we could go in reverse and start that over, they'd probably be in the majors because they're that good of an athlete. So a lot of this is just about young athlete choice and not about some decision from a league to make things more diverse or less diverse.
Well, but also, like, let's also point this out from ESPN's perspective. They've got this guy writing who's not the full-time writer. You know, he lists something else on his bio. This is nothing but the clickbait BS. By the way, this happens all over the place, but in ESPN's perspective, who are they to determine, you know what, we are the diversity police. We are going to go on patrol and have these report cards. And we're going to have a guy come in that says that Major League Baseball is not diverse enough. And we're going to leave out the fact that you can flip the argument any way you want to on any sport based on the percentages of how things, play out globally for the sport that we're covering. It's ridiculous. And it's not always sinister.
Exactly.
Everything has to be sinister. I'm not buying it. Sorry. I'm going to use common sense on any story. I'm not going to just read something and be like, this headline, man, Major League Baseball must
be racist based on this headline.
They're really holding people back from, they're not calling up enough diversity from the minors, not drafting enough. Get out of here with that. It's just not the case.
It's stupid, and you made a good point. The reasoning behind something happening like this is not always sinister. It could just be that a lot of young African Americans don't like baseball and don't want to play it. And guess what? It's America. That's fine. If they're dominating the NBA and you want to go play basketball and you're dominating youth sports and want to stay with it, stay with it. Play in the NFL. It's not baseball's problem of what race excels in the sport, ever. It's a meritocracy. It's why we love sports.